once I seen what first call was doing, it was a relief to me because I really didn't have time to do it.
Final lap for Dale Earnhardt as the Goodwin Chevrolet goes hustling off into turn one.
Two racing legends, one unforgettable ride. Sterling Marlin and Dale Earnhardt Sr. were the ultimate rivals on the track, but off the asphalt, and when the checkered flags were not in sight, their friendship was the real fuel that drove them. Tragically, their bond was broken by a devastating incident on the track. Marlin has decided to break his silence about the man who left the sport too soon. What has he revealed? Get ready for a story that will leave you on the edge of your seat. The beginning of the final lap. The 2001 Daytona 500 started like any typical season opener until it got entangled in the most tragic day in racing history. The Daytona 500 was held at the Daytona International Speedway in Florida. It was a 200-lap race that spanned 500 miles across an entire 2.5-mile tri-oval track. Energies were pent up as every spectator present anticipated the race and whoever the winner would be. However, they did not foresee the tragic ending that had come later on. From the onset of the competition, the game already had a series of unexpected results. First, on February 10th, Bill Elliott claimed the pole position alongside the second-place qualifier, Jerry Nadeau. Unfortunately, Jerry lost his spot because his car failed inspection checks during the qualification stage. The NASCAR inspectors had found an unapproved shock absorber and spring shackle components in Nadeau's vehicle, eventually disqualifying him. As a result, the officials then shifted Stacy Compton from the third position to the front, which meant he was to race alongside Bill Elliott. As for Dale Earnhardt, his time had gotten him the 27th fastest time in qualifying, and as a result, he was placed in the 14th position for the first Gatorade Twin 125 race. For the Intimidator, this position did not hold much significance. Despite his qualifying position, Dale Earnhardt had proved himself to be a champion winner and a Daytona icon. In short, he was almost a threat to everybody while they were on the track. Every driver and spectator understood Earnhardt's ability to perform exceptionally well in racing competitions. Earnhardt wore the calmest demeanor that had confidence labeled all over him. It was February 18th, the day of the race, but his confidence didn't just stem from this fact. The team was a combination of strong racers, his son, Earnhardt Jr., and Michael Waltrip, competing with the number 15 Chevrolet during the race. For most of the race, Earnhardt had his car leading in 17 laps. The initial three-quarters of the race went on without significant disruptions, aside from two caution flags flown in. The first caution was on lap 49 when Jeff Purvis crashed and lost control after hitting the wall out of turn 4. The second flag appeared during lap 157 when Kurt Busch, attempting to overtake Joe Nemechek, slid through the infield and struck the front stretch wall. Then came lap 173, when everything dramatically changed. At lap 173, Earnhardt's car was seen in 7th place alongside the vehicles of his teammates just in front of him. Michael Waltrip, who drove the number 15 blue car, was out front, and Dale Jr., who drove the number 8 car, trailed behind him, eager to complete a historic teammate-son-father finish. And then, a hideous wreck happened out of the blue. The chain reaction of crashes is said to have begun when Robbie Gordon turned into Ward Burton at the exit of Turn 2. That contact sent Burton spinning, and soon enough, the worst crash of the Daytona 500 started to unfold before everybody. Burton's car ran into Tony Stewart, which caused his vehicle to turn backward against the outside wall. Stewart's car was scrambled, flipped twice in the air, and landed on its roof in the infield. There were 18 cars involved in the wreck, and they included Mark Martin, Jason Leffler, Steve Park, another of Earnhardt's drivers, Rusty, who would rally back to finish third, Kenny Wallace, Jeff Gordon, the eventual Winston Cup champion for 2001. Others were Robbie Gordon, the defending Winston Cup champion, Terry Labonte, Mark Martin, Tony Stewart, Elliott Sadler, Jeff Burton, and Ward Burton, who had led the most laps in the race so far with 53. Dale Jarrett, the defending Daytona 500 winner, was also involved. Following the crash, a red flag was thrown, and the track stood still for a moment to to allow the cleanup crew get to work. As they cleaned the track, they realized that 5 other drivers, including Earnhardt, managed to escape the crash. He had somehow managed to survive the worst of it. But was this the worst crash to happen that day? Remember, this crash happened during lap 173, and the cleanup operations had to conclude before the race could continue at lap 180. During that subtle break, Dale Earnhardt contacted his pit crew through radio while his car was under maintenance. Between the crash and restart of lap 180, a spine-chilling dialogue unfolded that would later torment everyone. Richard Childress, the owner of the team that famously employed Earnhardt, remembered that Dale Earnhardt had mentioned that if they did nothing about the cars, it would end up taking a person's life. It was a grim prediction that would end up coming too soon, too fast. Surely, there was a reason Earnhardt made that statement. Just recently, NASCAR made some modifications to its vehicle specifications. During that period, the sanctioning body implemented control measures designed for cars racing on superspeedways at Daytona and Talladega. The new requirements included a carburetor restrictor plate for speed reduction and additional control on the springs and shocks. However, the racing suffered due to these new safety measures. Earnhardt never hesitated to express his opinions on the issue. Speaking out to the media, Earnhardt mentioned these transformations made racing the sorriest he had ever witnessed. They took racing out of the hands of the drivers and the crews. We can't adjust and make our cars drive like we want. They just killed the racing at Daytona. This is a joke to have to race like this. NASCAR's new rules had taken away the essence of car racing. To fix the situation, they devised other measures that frustrated Earnhardt and others even more. NASCAR's attempt to fix the problem introduced a new aerodynamic package for the cars competing at Daytona and Talladega for the Winston Cup Series. The organizational structure of this package worked to maintain track groupings, which enabled multiple cars to overtake each other even if they were bunched up close. NASCAR introduced these modifications to inspire enthusiasm in superspeedway competition again, and it worked for a while. During the fall of 2000, Earnhardt's exceptional driving skills came into play when he passed 17 vehicles within 4 laps to win the race at Talladega Superspeedway. The package worked for Earnhardt, and for a moment it seemed like NASCAR had finally found the perfect balance between speed and safety. But deep down, Earnhardt knew that the sport was changing, and its route wasn't so good. The 2001 Daytona 500, the final lap. The 2001 Daytona marked the debut of the new aerodynamic package that ran on an 800-kilometer track. The cars were engineered to maintain a compact formation, while NASCAR anticipated that this setup would enhance the race. However, the same race package created non-stop congestion at 190 per hour, which meant that any mistake could eliminate numerous competitors, as it had done earlier in the former lap. Yes, Earnhardt won at Talladega with this same package, but this race was somewhat different from all others. At the final restart, Marlin was in a close chase after Waltrip and Earnhardt Jr. For the record, Marlin had defeated Earnhardt a week before in the Gatorade duel and aimed to overtake the two. This time, he took the lead for 3 more laps. The black number 3 had no choice but to watch from behind, as Waltrip regained control from his brief 3-lap lead while teammate Junior Earnhardt battled him. Earlier, during Earnhardt's communication with his pit crew on the car radio, he asked his co-driver Andy Pilgrim at the Rolex 24 for guidance on the upcoming race. In reply, Andy simply told him to continue what he was doing. That was the end of the radio broadcast, the last time they would ever hear from him again. Earnhardt continued supporting his teammates on the radio headset while Waltrip and Junior maintained their leading positions. During the last 2 turns, Dale committed to protecting his teammates by using his car to hold Sterling Marlin at bay. The broadcast analyst Darrell Lee Waltrip took notice of this and mentioned it. Sterling had beat the front end off of that old Dodge, Marlin's car, just trying to get around Dale Earnhardt Sr. The intensity on the final lap was hard to ignore. On one side, Dale Earnhardt gripped his wheel as he tried to protect his team's future and winning streaks. Then it happened. Earnhardt's vehicle lightly touched Marlin's Dodge at turn 4, the last turn of the final lap. That single brush between the two vehicles sent Dale Earnhardt's car sliding off course. Earnhardt tried as much as he could to regain control of his car. But as he did and steered back onto the track, Schrader's Pontiac appeared suddenly. Dale Earnhardt crossed in front of Schrader, hit his car, and dragged him along the track. Before the blink of an eye, Earnhardt's black Chevrolet crashed directly into the concrete wall with enough force to vibrate the tracks on that day. But the problem was that this crash did not seem as serious. His car was traveling at 155 to 160 miles per hour, and as a result, the brutal impact destroyed the right rear wheel assembly and ripped the pins off the hood of his car. This eventually caused the hood of his vehicle to slam against his windshield several times violently. Hours after the crash, NASCAR President Mike Helton broke the silence across the speedway. He stepped up in front of the cameras, his face heavy with grief, and spoke the words that no one ever expected to hear. "We've lost Dale Earnhardt." And just like that, the world knew that the most significant driver in NASCAR was gone forever. Was there any reason to suspect foul play? When people started pointing fingers, why did they believe Sterling Marlin was responsible? Well, his revelation is about to set things straight. Sterling Marlin's account. Sterling Marlin didn't just lose a friend, he lost a brother. Yes, the relationship between Sterling and Dale goes back in time. They were longtime friends, and Marlin described Earnhardt as always friendly, easy to talk to, and having a joke or story to share. But that day on the track had left a permanent mark on Sterling, one that, to this day, cannot be cleaned off easily. It's been well over 2 decades since Dale Earnhardt's Senior's fatal accident at Daytona 500. Yet, numerous people continue to accuse Sterling Marlin of being responsible for Earnhardt's tragic accident on the last lap. When the news of Earnhardt's fatal incident broke out, all fingers pointed at Sterling Marlin. And even though they weren't true then and aren't true now, that didn't stop the anger from boiling over. The severe grief from fans immediately transformed into dangerous threats as they vented their anger. After the crash, Marlin faced real-life threats, one of which was a message on his trailer that read, "I will take your life, Sterling." Other threatening messages were uploaded on his website, and the phone at his workspace in Mooresville, North Carolina, did not stop ringing. Other people said they would harm both Marlin and his family members. As a result, Marlin Sterling was forced to address the issue publicly. Marlin avoided discussing the issue because he did not want it to seem like he was trying to defend himself. But then again, he needed to clear the air, as it was his only defense. For the first time since Dale's passing was announced, Marlin came out to give a speech from his home in Columbia, Tennessee. He made one final plea that people should carefully consider all information and re-watch the footage. Competition during races pushes drivers towards their best performance, and during the last lap of the Daytona 500, the competitors shared no ill intentions toward each other. According to Marlin, he had only seen the tape once, and from his observation, Schrader had pulled up front, making their formation a 3-car formation before the turn with him at the bottom. At the same time, other cars were rapidly closing in on them, with Rusty Wallace coming up and setting him loose. Then, a slight touch between Marlin and Dale Earnhardt's car sent them off course. In the process, Dale overcorrected, and that was the last time Marlin saw him. Against all odds, Marlin somehow managed to keep his car straight and finished 5th in that race. Though it hardly mattered to him, "It was pure luck that I caught it," he said. "When you run across the apron at Daytona at 180 miles an hour, you usually don't come back." And Dale Earnhardt didn't make it back. Since his retirement, the former NASCAR driver has devoted most of his time post-retirement to operating his Tennessee farm with a tractor because it provides some quietness and peace away from the buzz of his former racing career. It allows him to reflect on his amazing races and victories over the years. But one moment that will be pretty hard to let go is Dale's tragic passing. When investigations were later carried out, They showed the seatbelt failure and crash angle as the factors that made the crash extremely fatal. But Marlin still questioned whether anything could have happened differently. He still remembered the accusations and fear he received after the end of that race, but support eventually came. All members of the NASCAR community unified to support him, while Dale Earnhardt Jr. led the way by publicly hugging him in front of the fans during driver introductions. Jr. had approached Marlin for a hug at North Carolina Motor Speedway during the introductory ceremony a week following the tragedy. That moment changed everything. The audience turned from jeering to cheering, and at that moment, hateful accusations against Marlin ceased. Despite knowing he did not cause the accident, Marlin continually bears the weight of being there when history took such a tragic turn. Would the expert findings help to relieve his sense of guilt? What experts found? A large part of early investigative attention shifted toward discovering the cause of the seatbelt failure inside Earnhardt's vehicle after his fatal accident. Bill Simpson, who founded Simpson Performance Products, denied that the belt's failure resulted from any fault in the manufacturing process. Simpson also stated that the seat belts were adjusted during the race for the driver's extra comfort, which was not part of the instructions for using the seatbelt. Those who knew the matter also agreed that improper belt installation could degrade the belt's functionality. But this was not the only theory on the matter. Journalist Ed Hinton of the Orlando Sentinel insisted on going through the autopsy images and medical records of Dale Earnhardt for investigative purposes. Under standard Florida protocol, these records are considered public, which would have given Hinton free access to them in order to get possible answers. However, Teresa Earnhardt, Dale's wife, attempted to seal the autopsy materials from public access. Eventually, a compromise was reached. An expert crash wound analyst, Dr. Barry Myers from Duke University, was allowed to analyze Dale Earnhardt's case instead. Myers disclosed his findings on April 10, 2001. According to his analysis, Earnhardt's fatal injury did not just occur as a result of complete belt failure. His assessment revealed that Earnhardt's demise was also a result of unrestricted head and neck movement after his unrestrained car moved with excessive force. So, the belt's improper installation could not have changed the likely consequence of this fatal accident. Several other experts agreed with Myers. University of Miami expert Philip Villanueva had previously proposed the same theory, but needed subsequent autopsy images for validation. Medical director Dr. Steve Alvey of CART, alongside crash expert John Melvin from Wayne State University, also supported the findings in Myers's report. Following their conclusions, Bill Simpson was relieved after weeks of consecutive criticisms and work-related pressures. On that same day, NASCAR initiated its first official investigation into the fatal accident. Throughout the 6 weeks since the incident occurred, they had not shared any information publicly. The official investigation report, which was finally released on August 21, 2001, after spending over $1 million, identified multiple factors as causes of the tragic accident. They concluded that Earnhardt's demise was a result of contact with Schroeder's car, high crash speed, and seatbelt failure at the specific impact angle. The organization admitted they could not determine if Earnhardt would have survived if he had worn a head and neck support protective device during the accident. Following their investigation, black box crash recorders became mandatory for all vehicles to improve understanding of driver crash forces during future accidents. In the middle of all of this, the continuous pressure built against Bill Simpson led to his resignation as Simpson Performance Products president in July 2001. NASCAR received multiple clarification requests from the company lawyers, who stated that the belts met regulatory standards and had high manufacturing quality despite the failure in the crash. They also noted that manufacturing defects played no role in the incident, and the main problem stemmed from wrong installation practices. A year after leaving his own company under controversy, Simpson returned to the motorsports safety industry after his one-year non-compete clause expired to start Impact Racing Products. Because of Dale Earnhardt's fatal crash, NASCAR began implementing more extraordinary safety measures for future events. NASCAR underwent its first significant modification by transforming the seatbelt system. The investigation findings led racing teams to transition from 5-point to 6-point harness systems for driver protection. However, when NASCAR released its official report in August, it refused to enforce the head and neck support device requirements immediately. NASCAR President Mike Helton stated that the organization would not implement changes merely because of reaction. However, they did not fail to recommend the use of HANS devices to drivers at the same time. Prior to the official report release, 41 out of 43 drivers used the HANS system at the Pepsi 400 event in Michigan. Then came another tragedy. On October 4, 2001, RCA driver Blaze Alexander didn't survive at Charlotte Motor Speedway in a crash while racing for the lead. Ironically, the other driver racing him was Kerry Earnhardt, Dale's oldest son. Kerry's car flipped on its roof when Alexander slammed into the wall. The race never resumed, and Kerry was given the win. That crash forced NASCAR to make the ultimate decision. By October 17, 2001, NASCAR required that all drivers in its top 3 series start using either the HANS or Hutchins device. By 2005, NASCAR had phased out the Hutchins device, making HANS the only approved device. That wasn't the only change. NASCAR started using safer barriers, softer walls that absorb energy, at all the tracks that its top-level series uses. These barriers have been credited with cutting down on injuries during big wrecks. At the same time, NASCAR started trying out a new car. Everything they learned from Earnhardt's passing built the Car of Tomorrow, COT. It made its debut a few years later and was used until the Gen 6 car replaced it in 2013. Now, all the safety upgrades the COT came with, such as improved impact protection and more driver space, carried over to the Gen 6 design. These changes are still saving lives today. The safety features developed after Earnhardt's demise helped keep Ryan Newman alive in 2020 after he crashed during the final lap of the Daytona 500. It took Dale Earnhardt's tragic loss to spark these changes in NASCAR. With Marlin's confession about not being responsible, how much of what happened was just a result of bad luck? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Before you go, explore the other videos on your screen.